What's up, everybody? I'm James Withee, and today I'm going to be answering your questions about tattoos. Alright guys, so welcome back to another Q&A video. Basically, on this type of video, what I do is I answer questions from my social media that are about tattoos and try to provide the most comprehensive answer for you that I possibly can as a professional tattoo artist. As far as where specifically I'm going to be getting these questions that I'm answering in this video, most of them are going to come from my previous Q&A in the comment section, but I might be sourcing other questions from various videos that I have on YouTube and also my Instagram. So with that said, if you are looking to get any of your questions answered from a professional tattoo artist standpoint, then go ahead and leave them in the comments on this video or anywhere on my YouTube for that matter, even though they're more likely to get answered here. Or if you guys have a question that you need to kind of send me a picture so that I can view it and kind of see what you're talking about. Like if you have a picture of a tattoo or something that you have a question about and you want it answered, then go ahead and DM me that stuff on Instagram and make sure in your DM that you include that the question is asked for the purpose of being answered on my Q&A video. That way I don't just think it's random spam or something like that. So without further ado, let's get into it. Okay, so this first question is off of my previous Q&A video, and it's asked by a guy named Hector Pinedo. And basically, Hector is asking whether or not I can talk about ink allergies and what kind of options clients have if they do have allergies to ink. This question is one that I get asked quite a bit, not only by people on my YouTube channel, but also like just clients, you know, out of their own curiosity, they'll ask me in person. And I feel like ink allergies are a boogeyman in tattooing that a lot of people are really concerned about, but might not really have that big of a reason to worry about it whatsoever. In my 8 years of tattooing, with all the thousands of tattoos that I've done, I've had very few clients have an allergic reaction to ink. And typically when it does happen, it's very mild in the form of like just a super mild rash that feels slightly itchier than normal even after a tattoo is fully healed. Now, the ink that's the most common to be allergic to is red ink, or inks that have some sort of red pigment in them. And I think the number, if I remember right from a seminar that I took with a pretty prominent tattoo artist, the number is about 1 in like 200 or 250 people that are allergic to red pigments. Now, like I said, if you happen to be one of the unlucky ones that is allergic to red pigments, then it's very unlikely that you're going to have like a really severe allergic reaction to it. And if you do, then it's probably just going to be like a little bit of itchiness and maybe some little bumps that are on the tattoo. And in most cases, including a tattoo that I did on my girlfriend, she's allergic to red pigment slightly. The bumps, they ended up going away within maybe like 6 months after the tattoo was done and the ink was fully settled into the skin. So she didn't have any problem holding the pigment. I've heard of nightmare scenarios where people will be like severely allergic to pigments, particularly red, and they'll have like a really bad heal as a result. But most of those stories that I heard were purely anecdotal, where I really didn't see with my own eyes what was going on. And the people that were telling me those stories didn't really seem to be people that knew a whole lot about tattooing. They would be either clients, like just telling me secondhand stuff, or they would be tattoo artists that, you know, I'd met and worked with in the past that I really feel like it was a high likelihood they were making an excuse for having a bad heal on the tattoo they did, rather than it actually being the ink as like the cause of the problem. So long story short, it's probably not something that you should be really greatly concerned about. But if you are like allergy prone and you feel like you are one of those people that's just allergic to a plethora of different things and it's a large concern of yours and you're really paranoid about it, then my advice to you would be to either start very small and incrementally experiment with different inks in your body with small tattoos that only include 1 or 2 colors in each one, just to make sure that you're on the safe side. Or if you want to be even safer, just stick with black and gray tattoos or black work tattoos, because black ink is carbon based and carbon is what your body is made of, and it's very unlikely, as far as I know, that you would be allergic to black ink, and it's something that I've never heard of happening before. Alright, so this next question is a fairly long one. I'll do my best to read it without stumbling on my words here. So this one says, this question is asked by a person named Low, L-O-W, and he says, "Hey brother, first I want to thank you, blah, blah, blah. Let's see, I have a couple of questions. I'm 28, I've been drawing since I was a kid, so I feel like the quality of work that I do on paper is in the higher percentile. I practice daily and I've built up a pretty strong portfolio in my style." So his question is, in your experience or from your knowledge, what is the best way to transition into an unpaid apprenticeship? Meaning, do you recommend doing the apprenticeship full-time and working a side job for income? Or do you think it's smarter to stack up before the apprenticeship to be able to live off my savings until I start generating income? Or would you even recommend learning on my own and skipping the usual apprenticeship process? Don't do that. I'm at a point where I know what I want to do and I'm investing all my time and focus into making this a reality for myself. I'd appreciate your opinion and thanks again for the videos. Well, Mr. Lowe, I really appreciate you asking this stuff because these are important questions, and I think that it's awesome that you are pursuing your career as a professional tattoo artist because this is a very rewarding job to have. And I feel like tattoos are kind of on a wave right now where they're becoming very mainstream and there's a lot of money to be made in this industry. So it's a smart choice if you don't know how to do anything else besides be an artist. So with that said, I'm probably going to be making a whole series of videos for people that are trying to become professional tattoo artists, like videos about how to get an apprenticeship, you know, specific videos about how to get better at certain things technically in tattooing and different exercises and drills and practice and all that shit that you can do. But to answer your question, you know, there's a lot of different ways to skin a cat. You know, some people will go into an apprenticeship with a full-time job that's basically the opposite shift of whatever their tattoo hours are. So if you work like noon to 8 o'clock at night at a tattoo shop, like I've heard of people before that will work like graveyard shift at like a casino or a gas station or something. Like one of my close friends, his name's Darren Priest, he did his apprenticeship while he was working graveyard shift at a Circle K, and during his downtime while he was sitting at the counter as a cashier, he would draw and pretty much be practicing for his tattoo career while he was working that job. That's a really smart way to go about it, even though it is pretty exhausting having two full-time jobs because apprenticeships are pretty demanding with the amount of work that your mentor will ask you to do. But that's also not the only way to do it. You know, I mean, today they have all kinds of different jobs that don't necessarily require you to clock in and clock out for a solid 8-hour block. You know, some people that do apprenticeships these days, I'm sure, if they're smart, then they're getting jobs that are very flexible hour-wise, like they're doing Postmates, which my old apprentice used to do, or they're doing like Uber driving or Lyft driving or something like that. Something where they can use their car if they have one, which my buddy Darren Priest that I mentioned earlier did, and he was taking the bus to his apprenticeship there and back, and a Circle K there and back. But if you do have a car, then that's definitely a strong option. But yeah, I would try to choose a full-time job that has opposite hours of whatever your apprenticeship is at the tattoo shop. Now, with regards to saving a lump sum of money before you start an apprenticeship, that's not a bad idea either because there's going to be hard times ahead. Definitely, it's not easy going through a tattoo apprenticeship financially. You're definitely, you know, you're going to be struggling. You're going to be eating a lot of ramen noodles, and it's going to suck for a while, but that's part of it. You know, at the end of the day, it's cheaper than college, so it's not too big of a deal, in my eyes at least. But saving up a lump sum of money is a good idea also because you don't really know how long your apprenticeship's going to last. You know, some people buzz through an apprenticeship very quickly and finish it in 6 months. Some people will take a year, 2 years, maybe even 3 years for an apprenticeship, depending on how their mentor likes to do things. The reason I said don't do that when I was reading the part about you talking about skipping the apprenticeship and just learning on your own is because even though it's okay to be self-taught, and a lot of my friends that are really phenomenal tattoo artists are self-taught, it does take a lot longer to get good at tattooing if you are pretty much learning everything by yourself, trial and error. So, I mean, that's just a generalization. Obviously, everybody's situation is different, but definitely, if you're learning from somebody that already knows what they're doing and they already have all the answers to the questions that you have about the technical act of tattooing, then you're going to be definitely 1 or 2 steps ahead of the person that's learning on their own, out of their house. Not only because you know, the person is available to answer all of your questions, but also because you're absorbing the information in multiple different ways. You're watching them, you know, tattoo every day. You're pretty much learning through repetition with the setup and breakdown, learning how to be clean. You know, that stuff is really difficult to get a handle on if you're trying to learn it on your own. And not only that, but the business of tattooing, there's an entire other aspect that you learn quite a bit about during your apprenticeship. And it's important for you to kind of see how a successful, hopefully a successful tattoo shop runs day in, day out, and how your mentor interacts with customers, handles their appointment scheduling, all that sort of stuff, so that you can kind of transition into a smoother, more professional situation much earlier rather than later. So my advice to you would be to try your hardest to get an apprenticeship instead of being self-taught, and just know that you are going to have to grind twice as hard if you don't have somebody else supporting you during that apprenticeship. And you're probably going to have to get a job and struggle and, like I said, eat those ramen noodles for a long time. But it is worth it in the end if you can make it, which unfortunately, probably like 95% of aspiring tattoo artists don't. But either way, I do wish you lots of luck on your journey. I know this answer is kind of late. It's been about 4 or 5 months since I posted that last Q&A. But hopefully by now you're well on your way to becoming a professional tattoo artist. Okay, this next question comes from a chick named Kathy Garland. She's asking, would it be okay to be tattooed if I have type 2 diabetes? Well, with regards to diabetes, my knowledge on it is definitely limited because I'm not a doctor. I know that one type is worse than the other, and I'm not sure whether or not it's type 1 or type 2. But the reason why on tattoo consent forms, most of the time there will be a section that talks about diabetes and basically says that you have to confirm via that form that you don't have diabetes, is because people that are diabetic tend to have a harder time healing their tattoos. So, I'm sure that this can range in like severity, like the degree to which this is going to be a problem. I've tattooed people that are diabetic before, but I don't think they had like the severe form of diabetes where they have like a little machine hooked up to them that's always putting insulin in their body or whatever. None of them had a situation where they had to have like a limb amputated. They weren't like in that advanced stage of it from what I understand. So it is possible to get tattooed if you do have diabetes and still get a good heal. Those clients that I tattooed that had it, they definitely had slower heals than what would be average. But yeah, I would definitely talk to your doctor about it and see whether or not they think that it's safe for you to get a tattoo. And I would also just kind of assess your personal situation and see, whether or not you heal quickly when you get scrapes and cuts and stuff like that in general. Because if you feel like you're pretty close to normal in how fast you heal, then in my opinion, which like I said doesn't mean much because I'm not a doctor, you're probably gonna be totally fine if you have a tattoo. At least if you do like an extra good job of taking care of the tattoo during the aftercare process. Okay, so this next question is off of my previous Q&A video, and it's being asked by a guy named Dave Brown. Dave says, whenever I went to get a tattoo, the artist wants very specific reference images. I've had issues when I can describe the thing I want by talking about subject matter and art styles and such, but I can't find the exact image I want on the internet. How much should I worry about getting the right reference images? Should I keep trying different artists until I find one who is willing to take on a truly original piece? This is a pretty good question, and I feel like the answer is kind of complicated. It depends on the tattoo artist. Some tattoo artists really prefer to have clients bring like super specific reference images because it makes it easier for them to design basically, and it also makes it easier for them to ensure customer satisfaction. A lot of clients, if they come through and they just describe something very loosely to a tattooer, then the tattooer comes up with a design for them. A lot of clients are very hard to please design-wise, and pretty much no matter what the tattooer shows them, they're gonna find something that they don't like about it. Now, a lot of tattooers, because of this phenomenon, they will actually prefer that clients bring in very, very specific reference photos, so that there's very little chance they're gonna have to fuss around with the client in changing things or trying to like hit the nail on the head and get it very close to what the client is picturing in their mind if they're very particular about how their tattoo looks. Now, on the other hand, there are tattoo artists that prefer that a client doesn't really bring in a whole lot of reference photos, maybe 1 or 2 or 3 to kind of use as a starting point for what they like stylistically, or what, just to kind of get like a really loose idea of what they were picturing in their head. But at the end of the day, they really want to be able to put together their own composition, their own design, and make something that they think from a professional standpoint is going to look best and fit the best on the body. And a lot of times, the client, the stuff they design will be more artistically sound than what the client was originally describing or picturing. So, you know, I kind of fall into the second category where I just want clients to kind of give me like a loose idea, maybe show me a picture or two, or maybe not even show any pictures at all and just tell me to run with it and make it cool however I can make it look cool. But it really depends on the type of artist you go to. And if you're looking for something that is very original and you really can't find any references that closely represent the kind of tattoo that you want to get, then you're going to have to shop around quite a bit. And my suggestion would be to avoid tattoo shops that are going to be like the more budget shops, because in those shops you're probably going to find people that are less willing to, or maybe even less capable of coming up with a very original design for you. You know, they might be the type of artist where originality is much less of a concern for them, and maybe they're just like a street shop that's just cranking out like flash all day, which is like pre-made tattoo designs, and they're more technicians rather than being like more well-rounded tattooers. So long story short, there's nothing wrong with either preference that a tattooer might have. You know, there's nothing wrong with being more of a tattooer that is just banging out flash, or more of a tattooer that's a custom tattooer. But what you were looking for is a custom tattoo artist, and you're going to have to shop around quite a bit and kind of talk to people in person and express you know, the fact that you want something that's totally original and unique to them, and see how they respond to it to decide whether or not they're the artist for the job. Okay, so this next question comes from Daniel Penaloza, and he's saying, since you talked about gaining and losing weight, I'm looking at getting my first tattoo around my upper arm, and I'm curious to know how much of an effect muscle growth will have on a tattoo on that area. So this question right here I get asked quite a bit. It might actually be like one of my most common questions on my channel that people will just randomly leave in the comments on different videos. Especially my video that is tattoo tips for teenagers, where I talked about why I think it's important for people to wait until they're finished growing before they get tattooed, because it's possible that their tattoos might shift positioning wise or symmetry wise on their body as, you know, they basically gain flesh and bone and all that sort of stuff, right? So a lot of people, dudes, will hit me up on here and basically talk about how they're like planning on lifting a lot of weights and how they're going to get real swole, and how they are worried that their tattoos are going to shift in position as they go through that muscular growth process. Personally, I feel like the amount of people that ask this question is disproportionate to the actual risk that is posed by lifting weights, right? So it's much different if you're like somebody that's 5'3", 5'4", 120 pounds, you know, 15, 16 years old, and they're gonna grow into a person that's 5'11", 190 pounds or whatever, and 24 years old, 25 years old. That's a much different scenario than somebody who is already a full-grown adult that, you know, like let's say hypothetically you're in your early 20s or something, and you're a dude and you weigh 150, 160 pounds, and you plan on putting on 20 pounds of muscle, you're gonna be 170, 180 pounds. You know, it's possible that your tattoo might shift in positioning, but it's gonna be much less so than in the previous situation I described. So personally, I feel like people are kind of worrying about it a little too much in that situation where I'm talking about weightlifting. Unless you're like a super string bean. You know, if you're 6'2", 130 pounds, and you're just starting to lift weights and you have a really low body fat, you know, you might see a very dramatic difference in how much size you gain. And I've seen that before with, like, you know, one of my buddies from high school. He was a string bean like that, and he ended up getting super swole. You know, in his situation, it probably would have been bad to get tattooed when he was hella skinny like that. But I feel like that's a super, super rare case. You know, the average person that works out, lifts weights, gets in shape, and changes their body isn't going to be gaining like a giant amount of weight. And I feel like, you know, in most people's circumstances, they're going to be starting closer to like an average build, and then just getting more trim and more tone and more muscular from there, rather than being somebody that, like I said, is a string bean and ends up becoming like a monster with fucking very low body fat, even in the end, after they end up going through their whole lifting journey. So long story short on that, I wouldn't worry about it too much unless you are one of those extreme examples. And if you are, I wouldn't be able to tell, because it is on a case-by-case basis. I don't know what you look like, and you know, you're gonna have to figure that out for yourself by both evaluating your current state and then what your goals are, and then the probability of you reaching those goals, and weigh the importance of that risk with your desire to get tattooed. All right, so this next question is asked by Oxymoron Ariel. She is asking me, is there anything you can do to prolong the legibility of medium/small text tattoos? I went into mine knowing it would blur over time, but now I kind of wish I'd chosen to make it bigger to avoid it being a total blob in a few years. In this situation, I really don't think there is much you can do to prevent your tattoo from blurring over time. You know, the reason that tattoos do blur, like little text tattoos where the loop in an E or something like that might close up over a long period of time, is because the ink is basically spreading into areas of flesh that it didn't originally get deposited into, like either via capillaries or just kind of permeating into fat tissues and stuff like that. It happens like hella on areas of the body that have more capillaries, like the wrist or the collarbone or whatever. And unfortunately, there's not a whole lot you can do to make it spread slower once you've already gotten the tattoo and made that decision that's going to be a permanent mark on your body. So, you know, this question is an important one because it illustrates the importance of making the right decision in the first place and not getting too small of a text tattoo to where you're going to have that sort of problem over a long period of time. And a lot of that has to do with trusting your tattoo artist's recommendations at the time of the tattoo and knowing that they have a lot of experience with this stuff and they've seen a lot of tattoos age poorly, heal poorly because things are too small and lines are too close together. And if your tattoo artist is worth their salt, then they're going to do a good job of advising you like, hey, this is the minimum size that you should go with on this text tattoo. And unfortunately, some people don't listen to their artist when their artist makes that recommendation, and the artist ends up just, you know, kind of biting the bullet and doing it smaller than they know they should anyway because they need the money and you know, they got rent to pay and bills to pay and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, definitely you gotta give some trust to the artist if they're saying something like that, because they're not just saying it to try to get you to do a bigger tattoo to charge you more money. It's definitely for your own good, and they're trying to make sure that you have a tattoo that looks good for a lifetime. Now, with that said, I mean, even though there's nothing you can do with your current tattoo to make sure that it's still legible many years down the road if it just happens to age that way, it is possible, you know, without knowing what the tattoo looks like or how big of a text or script tattoo you have, it is possible that you can just cover it up in the future if it's something small, if it's just one word or something like that. So hopefully that is the case, and if not, then maybe you can get laser tattoo removal later on and either lighten it up and cover it up, you know, even if it is a larger, like a paragraph of text or something, or you can do many sessions of laser removal and just get it gone completely, which will probably be quite a bit easier once the tattoo does age, because some of the pigment particles will have already been removed by your body's natural immune defenses over that long period of time. So there is hope for you, but you'll just have to kind of wait and see, and hopefully it does work out for you and it doesn't end up super blurry. All right, so that's about it for today's video, guys. I've scrolled through quite a few of the comments on my previous Q&A, and it did provide enough questions to source to make an entire video out of, which I am happy about. Hopefully I can do this sort of Q&A video for you guys more consistently going into the future. I feel like it's a really great way to interact with my audience on YouTube and kind of provide a resource for you guys to get answers from a real professional tattoo artist that you can trust to a very much higher degree than just trying to Google around and find the answers on your own on some article or something like that. So if you guys do have questions, like I said in the beginning of the video, leave them in the comments section of this Q&A or anywhere on my YouTube, even though I'm probably primarily going to be sourcing them from this Q&A the next time I do one. And like I said, you can always hit me up on Instagram. While you're there on my Instagram, check out you know, pictures of my tattoos to keep up with my latest work and all that stuff. It's at James Withee Tattoo on IG. And if you guys like this video, drop a like on there, and hopefully you did. We'll see you next time.